Welcome to episode 47 of the Ohio Lodge of Research podcast, OLR Connections. In this episode, Right Worshipful Brother Chad Kopinski begins a conversation with Dr. Heather Calloway. Heather is the executive director of the University Collections at Indiana University and the co-founder of the Center for Fraternal Collections and Research. This effort is concentrated on collecting and preserving the history and culture of fraternal groups. Previously, Dr. Calloway was the museum curator and managing director of the Scottish Rite House of the Temple in Washington, D.C. In this episode, Heather and Chad discuss the role of Masonic museums and libraries and how they can be utilized by the fraternity.
I probably should, at least for this recording, tell like how I know you or how I met you. Because I blame James Buckhorn, just because I blame James Buckhorn for many things. He heard me talking about a guy named John Shearer, I think, and I don't remember where we were talking, but he said, "Have you ever met Heather Calloway?" I'm like, "I have no idea who you're talking about." And I contacted you about that, that Shearer book at in Amesville
The
Lodge.
one that was on auction. Yeah.
Well, Amesville has theirs, but I had started to do some looking into the history of that book. Yeah, there was a couple in the Library of Congress, and there was the one that at auction. And when I talked to the auction house, theirs didn't match what I had. And I remember contacting you, and we had a call like this over Zoom. And over the call, you were getting like, I would say giddier, but you kept saying to me like, "This book shouldn't exist." Like, you had the same questions that I did, which, and then that started you and I talking about, my buddy Shearer, and you've been really wonderful to me as I did. But your dad was heavily involved with Freemasonry, right? Did he get to
He was
Grandmaster?
Grandmaster. Yeah, he was Grandmaster. Yep.
Do you remember
early 90s? Yeah. Yeah, I was in high school. So I think I was a junior when he was, I'm pretty sure. So
did you have to be involved with that at all, or no? Did you have to like go traveling with him, or?
Well, he traveled all over the state to go to his visits and stuff. And it's like they get appointed to the bottom of the line, and it takes 8 or 9 years to get through the line. Yeah. So it was just normal for us that's what he did. And he's always going to some middle of nowhere town and some lodge meeting. So we had lots of jokes about it, but that was just normal for me.
Okay. Was your mom involved or no?
No, she's not a joiner.
That's funny.
Not at all.
I don't know why I find that funny. I think I just do. Like,
she didn't want any part of it.
Really?
Mm-mm.
How could she avoid it? Like, I would think that,
I mean,
you just did.
She didn't. I mean, those, you go to some of those things and the people invite you to join, but she just was not into that.
That's funny. Yeah, I don't know. I think I have a weird perception of Grandmaster's kids. I kind of think of them like teachers' kids or preachers' kids, they have that sort of outward, mask to the world, and then indoors they're like, "Oh God, we gotta go to another, green bean
Yeah, I make fun of it, and I have lots of jokes because I've been to more installations than most Masons I know.
It almost seems like you were, engineered to join a sorority once you got to college, or engineered to kind of like, or
I mean, no, I'm a first generation college person, so
really,
yeah, so that wasn't
okay.
It was the one way to connect at UNM. The average age when I went there was 32 and I was 18. And so the way to meet people your age in that world was Greek life or sports, if you're in sports. And I made cheerleading, but I just decided that was more than what I wanted to do in college. I had already done it for years and years. So I, did the sorority thing and lived in the sorority all 4 years. And it was great. I really wanted to go out of state, but because my parents, I got a full ride to UNM, and it was really hard to say, I'm not going to take my free college.
Right.
So I kind of had to go there.
I remember that you have an undergraduate, was it a major or minor in theology?
I have undergrad, I did poli-sci and religious studies, and then I went to seminary to do American Christian history. So I have a master's in theological studies.
How did that get you from there to, you know, archivist and Scottish Rite? Like, it was.
Sure. I was already studying that stuff, studying why people join things, the history of how um, all of these different religions traveled around America and popped up. And then in addition, the lodges were doing the same thing at the same time. And so my master's thesis, my first master's degree was studying, like, the men were joining the lodge and the women were in like the YWCA and these other groups at that same time in the 1880s, 1890s. And they each were kind of in their own realm, but that was a way they could connect with people in their new communities, especially across the West. So being from the West, I was really interested in how those cities popped up and like what their structure was, to get to know people and support, because there's not a lot out there in the West other than the miners and people looking for, building the trains. And
It seems to me I always think people join because of meaningful connections. Like that's why they join. It's why they stay. And then, when those go away, it's why they leave. I don't know that people are meant to live alone. Like, I think people want to feel connected to each other, the earth, the deity, something.
yeah.
Was there a
Um,
psychology to joining that you looked at, or just sort of the history of it?
no, the history and the sociology of like what made people want to join and then why'd they stay, and then, you know, what made them, whether it was church or lodge or some sort of club, thinking more like women because they weren't allowed to
Right.
do the same kind of stuff. Um, why did they go to that? Why did they do it every week? Why did they wear these costumes? Why did they, all the different things, especially back in the day that they used to do 100 years ago. It's fascinating to me that, it was so important that every week we went down on Thursday nights and got dressed up and read the minutes and did some sort of ritual, and then went home, and that it grew the way that it was so popular in the golden age of fraternalism. It's just fascinating to me that that was a thing.
I realize this isn't a question that's easy to answer, and you've already kind of answered it. But I mean, what was it that they were? I guess why was it important? Like, what was it they were trying to? Yeah, what was it they're trying to do? What was it that? What
I
did
mean,
this?
I think it was just a way for me. It's like it was a way for them to connect with other people that had similar interests. So if you look at the way immigration happened in our country that time, people would move to an area where there were people that they had something in common with.
Right.
So if they were from Poland, then these Polish people all settled in this place, and this was their church, and this was their lodge, and this was their like heritage society, and they had a whole little enclave of like their own group. So that helped them with businesses and economics and finding housing and all the other things. And that's just how America grew. And no matter whether you started in New York City or Chicago or wherever, that you went to the part of the city or the town where there were people like you and you could get a start. And
Right.
so those clubs were essential. That was your social time.
Well, it wasn't even little. They were big towns like Chicago.
And back then they didn't all speak English. So when they came to the States, that was a way to help assimilate, and they learned from each other and taught each other, and it was a safe way to do it within your own community, and then also, branch out with public schools and things like that, where they were learning English and other ways to be successful in their new community.
I just want to talk to them, just hear those stories.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it always frustrates me that, I don't know, those stories get lost. I imagine it's kind of where you come in, or what you try to do as
Mm-hmm.
well. So
I try to capture those stories while these people are still around, but also just the ones that have been written down in these books and texts and journals and things like that, little bulletins that we published, little things. And so trying to save those histories, because it tells the history of that community. And that's why it's so important to me.
well, and in talking to you, I mean, I get the sense that, I don't know, when I was growing up, history to me seemed to be like the big things they talk about in the history books. Like, here's the chapter on the Battle of Gettysburg. But that's not really what history is. History's the individual stories, or the individual things. I mean, that's, I don't know, the big view versus the smaller view. Is that kind of you think about it, or no?
I mean, of course you need to know like those big picture
Right.
moments in American history, but I'm more fascinated with other ones just because, I that's my research interest. So
Yeah, that's the thing that I've, again, since meeting you and talking to you, people think I know things and I don't know why. But when I go and talk to a lodge, they're always like, look, you know, this is Warren Brothers Slattery's spork. I'm like, nobody's cares about,
no, they
nobody.
don't.
Yeah. So what, you know, but somebody does, yeah. Um, so I always think lodges tend to hold on to the wrong things, or they're valuing the wrong things. So,
That's why I try to teach people, save all those, the periodicals, the minute books, the little pieces of paper that we printed for this random lodge in this small town, because that's the only place that still exists that
that's true.
tells that little story. So
Because I have no idea what I'm doing in research. I really don't. Like, I am just kind of running blindly into this, and hoping for the best. So you and Dan Gardner are the ones who are like, no, 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 you're not dumb and crazy. So
no, just that's what happens to all of us. We find a subject or a thing we're interested in, and then you just end up down a rabbit hole, and then it just keeps popping up. And and you get to do more and more research if you're into that. And so we're going to always encourage you to keep learning about Shearer and share what you find.
but I guess I always thought of Masonic research as being, I don't know, history and I don't know, beyond the likes of me, because I'm not a librarian, right? I'm a theater major, and there just seemed, and one of the hard
Yeah,
parts
but
we have is getting, what, you're laughing at it.
no, you don't need a degree or a special background in order to be into history. Anybody can study it and get into a topic and go nuts trying to find the story, because it's just a story. And so trying to figure out, I love all the clues of like, where'd this guy live, and who did he hang out with, and where did he sell his stuff, and what bad things happened to him. I want to know all of that. And when I study other things similar, people related topics, I always want to know the full story, and especially the things that weren't printed and that other people didn't talk about.
But sometimes that is hard to find. I mean, with Shearer, I mean, I've gone to all the online things, as looking at newspapers and books. Now I have to kind of get into. I did find minute books from his old lodge, but now I have to sort of find, yeah, the things that aren't online, or the things that are hidden somewhere, and that seems to be, man. means I actually have to travel and do things as opposed to, sitting in my nice comfy room and, just looking at the Library of Congress. So
yeah, but then you'll finally find like, some of those missing pieces that open up another part of the history.
I found many of them, and then they end up bringing up more questions. That's the thing that is exciting and frustrating. And I don't know like how you do it, because I don't know how you're comfortable. I don't know how you get comfortable with there always being more questions. There always being that like I don't know when I'm supposed to be done with this. I don't know when I'm supposed to be done looking
Well, I don't think you're ever going to be done. I think you're always going to be like, if you find a new thing, it adds to the story. And if you publish a book and then you find 2 new things right after, well, when we do a new edition, a new volume, you can add the new things.
What sort of things? I mean, are you still doing research now or no?
Yeah, of course. I'm always doing research, but I'm always doing like multiple projects at once. And then I put one away and focus on another and then bring one back out. I'm still doing Gustav Brand. Seth Anthony and I are studying him and his art and where he did his art throughout the Midwest and where it still exists, and that's one of those, like, it's never going to end because we're always finding new places that we didn't know about where his art is, whether it's in a post office or a lodge or a theater or some other public building somewhere. You can only find so much online. And then a lot of it's word of mouth. Like once people hear that we're talking about this, then they're like, oh, I know another painting that guy did. And then they share it with us. And so it's, that's just one research project I have going right now.
That's the guy we spoke about. He was a muralist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he just went around doing murals for places. Like, what was his
so
deal?
that was he was an artist. And so he had a business. He came as an immigrant from Germany and ended up in Chicago. And then a group of artists and architects were kind of all in that same world, and they ran in, similar circles. And, they were Masons, they were Shriners, they were everything. And, they networked together. So the architects would hire the artists to do the work inside their spaces. He was, worked for Marshall Fields for 10 years as the head of, interior design, but then he created his own business. And so he did a ton of fraternal art. So a lot of it it shows stuff that are talked about in the ritual. So you'll have lots of biblical type, Old Testament stories depicted in these murals. And, for shrine, there's camels and there's Egyptian, and it's, so, he really had these like really beautiful mural type settings in these spaces. Even here in Bloomington, he did the art at our courthouse, our original courthouse downtown. He did the stained glass, and then he did some murals inside the building. And I didn't even know that when I started learning about this guy. I was into him because he did fraternal art, and then I found out, oh, but he did all these other things too, which is really cool.
So are you finding that lodges don't know what they have? Like other lodges, they're like, oh, there's just a mural on the wall, and they don't.
Yeah. I mean, unless the bigger spaces that such as Allentown Masonic Temple in Pennsylvania or Grand Lodge in New Jersey, those spaces know what they have, and they know this is the artist and this is what we have. Some of the other spaces don't know. So that's kind of, I'm on the hunt to find, some of these buildings are gone. When I find some of his stuff that says like, these are the ones he was commissioned to do. And then I look up the building, half of them don't exist anymore.
And you just hope that somebody took a photograph of it at some point, or
Maybe. I mean, I would love to, I just want to keep finding his work and see what else is out there.
It seems odd to me that a lodge would commission a mural. That had to have been expensive at that point in time, right?
I mean, it was normal though. You had the art to help tell those stories. So similar to a tracing board,
Yeah.
those paintings on the wall, they could use in their teachings, more to be like, it helps the imagination. You look up there and you're like hearing the story and hear these guys talking about it. And then you're like, wow, that is what it was like. But he did all kinds of theaters and other stuff like that as well. That was just the norm for a large public type building. That's how they decorated inside was these murals.
I haven't gone with Dan Gardner on this journey, but he sort of talked to me as he's built his museum out there. Curating an exhibit to me seems, I don't know, that just seems difficult. Like, how do you actually,
Well, you have to figure out what story do you want to tell, and then what pieces are going to help you tell that story. And Dan did a great job of that at his museum, because he's not a museum person, but you don't have to be. He cares about the subject, and also wanted to meet people where they were. So he wanted it approachable. He wanted people to understand when they came in and learn from his exhibit. He also he was willing to change that space. A lot of Masonic buildings aren't willing to change the space that they have their exhibits in. Like, what if we turn this back into a dining room or a library or this? Well, then you change it back eventually. But for now, if you're going to treat it like an exhibit space, own it. And he owned it. He had stuff commissioned. He built stuff. They made exhibit cases, and they have the graphics that go with, that really augment the artifacts. So he doesn't need 5 million artifacts, because he's got some really amazing pieces to go with those stories that he's telling. And when you go all around his room, each little area of the room has a different little story. So you could start in any part of the room and then just keep walking around and fully understand that story, even if it's not chronological. But it's, he really did a good job in telling some of the parts of the stories that we don't always tell, whether it's race or immigration or people that weren't allowed in, telling the story of the American West and how Masonry was so important in other ways in the West. It's fascinating, and his entire exhibit there is, anyone, Masonic or not, would learn a lot just from going through it.
He said that a lot of what he was doing the museum for was that, yes, it's that Mason is walking through there, but he has to think about the fact that the guy probably has a significant other and some kids with him in the car as well. And like, there's got to be something for them, because there's only sometimes you can walk around going, cool, look at, you have to have that same kind of context.
Yeah, and he turned the room that he turned into this used to be where the books were, and nobody ever messed with the books. Nobody ever did anything with any of that. And so the fact that they let him change that space and adapt it for this approachable exhibit that's like right there as you walk in from on the street, they didn't throw the books away. They just moved them around to other spaces. And if you asked him, I bet people never come and utilize those books. So it was a really good way for him to use that space. And it's downtown there. You can walk in, you can park on the street right by it. So yeah, it's neat.
A long time ago, and I wanted to go visit the Grand Lodge of Iowa, because they supposed to have a phenomenal museum and a library. Have you ever gone to that?
That's one of the few I haven't been to yet.
I didn't make it, but I remember talking to somebody there saying, yeah, they have all these books and nobody ever really comes in and uses them. So, Yeah.
A lot of the Masonic libraries, we pay people in some spaces to catalog these books and have them, but we're not open at times that normal people could come and utilize those books. I want to go use them, but you're open in the day when I'm at work. And that's most people that would want to utilize those libraries are at work. And so we've never been able to meet that business person time or weekend time or create a different work week for ourselves so that it's accessible at another time of day. And then I think we could also um nowadays we've got to think of how can we get more of this stuff online and get it digitized so that, like you said, you're sitting there at home and doing your research. And same with me, if I'm at work or at home, I'm digging through newspapers.com or whatever. I want to see it online. I don't want to have to go to Iowa and dig that up. And also, we're spending a ton of money throughout the states in duplicating these same libraries over and over and over and over. Why? We could pool resources and people and time, and if we were doing more digital, that would make that stuff accessible 24 hours, and you could sit at home and read those books all day. Yes, we still need some hard copies, but do we need all of them? No.
Yeah.
Join us for episode 48, where Heather and Chad will continue this conversation and discuss her research opportunities, as well as the role of research for the fraternity at large.